All right, so we're going to be looking into this plane crash in South Korea today. A lot of you have been asking for a deep dive on this, and it's definitely a tough one. Over 120 people died. Makes it the worst aviation disaster in the country for decades. We've got a few sources here from the Associated Press, Fox News, and Bloomberg. So, yeah, we'll try to figure out what exactly happened to Jeju Air Flight 2216.
Yeah, it's a horrible situation. It seems like a Jeju Air Boeing 777-800 was returning from Bangkok with 175 passengers and 6 crew members. And while it crashed while trying to land at Muan International Airport.
Yeah, and it sounds like from these early reports, they think it was a problem with the landing gear. What makes that part of the plane so important, and what could cause it to, fail?
So you can think of the landing gear like the legs of the plane. Without them working the right way, you basically can't land safely. The plane just becomes this giant metal sled skidding all over the place. And there's a bunch of reasons why they might fail. Could be a mechanical problem or maybe something with the hydraulics. It could even be something like bird strike, messing things up during landing.
And like you said, it sounds like this plane skidded off the runway, hit a concrete wall, and then caught fire. Must have been terrifying for everyone on board.
Absolutely. The reports describe it as total chaos. People getting thrown from their seats when the plane hit the wall, and then the fire starting up. It really shows how powerful these crashes are.
Yeah, one of the reports from Bloomberg mentioned a mayday call from the pilots, and Fox News said there was a warning about a possible bird strike just a few minutes before. So it sounds like things were pretty crazy in the cockpit. Do you know if the pilots had any time to react?
That's what investigators will be working hard to figure out. Hopefully, the black boxes will give us some answers, the ones that record all the flight data and what's said in the cockpit. Was the landing gear just a sudden malfunction? Or were there signs that maybe the pilot should have noticed? These are the details that'll help us put the whole story together.
The AP mentioned the plane had its regular maintenance, and there was nothing to suggest there were any problems before. So it's kind of a mystery how this could happen.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to find out. Planes are incredibly complex these days, and they're built with so many safety features. There are even backup systems for important things, like the landing gear. But even with all that, sometimes things just go wrong. It's a combination of factors that lead to these disasters.
It's a lot to process. This horrible crash, a possible landing gear problem, a mayday call, maybe a bird strike.
Mm.
And on top of all that, there's all the political stuff going on in South Korea.
It does seem like this happened at a pretty sensitive time for the country. It's going to complicate an already difficult situation for sure. I think it's important to remember that even though this crash was devastating, landing gear problems aren't actually that common. They only cause a tiny percentage of plane accidents overall.
Yeah, that does make me feel a little better, I guess. But when they do happen, it's usually really bad. What can they even do to prevent these things from happening? Are there backup systems?
Oh yeah, for sure. Modern planes have these extra hydraulic systems, so even if one part of the landing gear breaks, there's another one ready to go. And pilots practice these exact situations in simulators all the time.
So they're trained for it. But I guess even with all that practice, sometimes those quick decisions when everything's going wrong can really make a difference.
Exactly. And that's why this investigation is so important. Yeah. Did they miss any warning signs? Did they do what they were supposed to do in an emergency? The Mayday call tells us they knew something was wrong, but we need to know what they did in those last few minutes.
You mentioned bird strikes before. Could that have messed up the landing gear?
It's definitely possible. Bird strikes aren't super common, but they can do a lot of damage, especially during takeoff and landing. If a bird hit the landing gear, it could have caused it to malfunction.
So we've got a bunch of possibilities here. Could be a mechanical problem, human error, or even that bird strike. How do investigators even start to figure out what happened?
It's like putting together a giant puzzle. They'll look at the wreckage, check the plane's maintenance record, see how much experience the pilots had, and of course they'll listen to those black boxes. They're trying to make a timeline of everything that happened, understand the decisions that were made, and figure out what went wrong.
And with all this technical stuff, we can't forget about the people who died. Over 120 people, each one with a family and a story. It's just awful.
Yeah, you're right. It's easy to get caught up in all the details. But each of those passengers was someone's loved one. They had hopes and dreams, and their lives were cut short.
One of the articles said 2 of the passengers were from Thailand. And they're still trying to figure out who all the victims are. It just shows how this tragedy affects so many people around the world.
It really does. This will have consequences for a lot of people, not just in South Korea. Families from all over are grieving, and the investigation will involve people from different countries working together.
And you mentioned the political situation in South Korea. This crash probably won't help things, will it?
It definitely makes things more complicated. People are going to be watching to see how the government handles this, and it could make the political tensions even worse. It's a very delicate situation.
It seems like this crash will have a big impact on aviation safety, international relations, and even politics in South Korea.
Exactly. This isn't just about one plane crash. It's about the bigger picture, what it means for everyone, and the questions it raises about the world we live in.
A world where we want to travel and connect with people. But there's always a risk when we push the limits of technology and what humans can do.
Yeah, and that brings us to some important questions about what's next for air travel.
It makes you think, like how do we keep wanting to travel and connect with each other when we know there are always these risks?
Yeah, that's the hard part, isn't it? We're so used to flying everywhere now, but then something like this happens and reminds us that it's still really complicated and dangerous. It takes a lot of technology, human skill, and even the right weather conditions for everything to work out.
One of the articles said that Jeju Air is a low-cost airline. Does that have anything to do with safety? I mean, do you think that matters?
I think it's something we should definitely talk about, but we can't just assume anything. Low-cost airlines still have to follow the same strict safety rules as the bigger ones. Their business model might be different,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't automatically mean they're less safe.
So we need to look at how they do things instead of just saying they're not safe because they're cheaper.
Exactly. The investigators are going to be looking at Jeju Air's maintenance procedures, how they train their pilots, and their overall safety culture, as part of the whole investigation.
What about Boeing? I mean, they built the 737-800, right? They've had
Right.
some problems with safety on other planes lately, so what are they going to do with this investigation?
Boeing's going to be a big part of this. They'll provide technical support and help figure out what happened with the plane. They'll check to see if there were any design flaws or problems with how the plane was built that could have caused the landing gear to malfunction.
Hmm.
Their reputation is at stake here, so they'll need to work with everyone to figure out what really happened.
So it sounds like a lot of people are involved in this Jeju Air Boeing International Aviation groups, and of course the South Korean investigators. What are you going to be looking for as things move forward?
The black boxes are going to be super important. That's how we'll understand what was going on in the cockpit before the crash. We'll be able to hear the pilots talking, how they reacted to the emergency, and what they said to air traffic control.
It's like we're going back in time and hearing what happened as it was happening.
Yeah, exactly. And besides the black boxes, they'll look at the wreckage itself. They'll put the pieces back together, check the landing gear system, and see if there are any signs of damage or anything unusual that might tell us why it malfunctioned.
It's a lot of work, but it's important to find out what happened and try to prevent it from happening again.
Definitely. This investigation could take months or even years to finish, but what they find out will be really important for the whole aviation industry. It could change safety rules, training procedures, or even how they design planes in the future.
Wow, you've given us a lot to think about. This plane crash in South Korea is so much more than just a sad event. It reminds us that air travel is complicated, that we always need to improve safety, and that it's important to do these investigations to find out what happened and stop it from happening again.
I agree. And as we wrap up, I think we should remember the people who lost their lives. Over 120 people gone, leaving their families and communities grieving. Our thoughts are with them as they go through this terrible time.
Yes, absolutely. It's easy to forget when we're talking about all the technical stuff that real people were affected by this. Let's hope that something good can come out of this tragedy and that air travel will be safer in the future. Thanks for helping us understand all of this.
You're welcome. It was great to be here.